All right, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I'm going to be moderating this meeting tonight. So hopefully you are here to join us for a community update meeting. So this is focusing on the enforcement activities and other EGLE activities around the Arbor Hills landfill. So we're excited to chat with you tonight. We've got the recent consent judgment that I'm sure you are all aware of. So we're going to be working on chatting you through some of that information. So I want to go over what the things are that we're going to be talking about tonight. But before I get into that, I do want to just quickly introduce the panelists that I have with us tonight. So panelists, if you can just turn your cameras on just for a minute. And then when I read your name out, if you can just unmute yourself, say hi a second, and just so that folks can see who we're talking about. So I'm going to just go in the order that I see you all. So I've got Alex Clark. She's with our materials management division. She's in the enforcement unit. I got Scott Miller. He's going to be doing most of the chatting with you guys today, at least during the presentation portion. And he is the district supervisor in our Jackson district office for our air quality division. The next person that I am seeing is Jeff Rathbun, and he is also in our air quality division. He works in our enforcement unit. And then I've got Brett Coulter and Gary Schuen and Mike Kowalczyk, and they're all going to be helping answer questions as well. And then last but not least, I do have Jim Ostrowski. He's my boss, so be gentle with him. He's going to be helping in the back get questions and answers kind of around and help me make sure that the virtual aspect of this meeting goes very smoothly for everybody. So thanks to the panelists. You guys can go ahead and turn your cameras off. I'll prompt you again in just a few minutes once we get done with the presentation. So I'm going to go through a few housekeeping things. And then after I do that, I'm going to pass it over to Scott Miller. You just met him a second ago, and some of you might know him already. He's going to just walk us through a pretty short presentation, giving you some background information on the landfill itself and some of the operations there. We're going to talk about what is a consent judgment. So a consent judgment is the enforcement action that we're talking about, but because we have some different kinds of enforcement actions with the state environmental agency, we wanted to talk to you about how that one might be a little bit different or similar to what you're used to. We're going to talk about the penalty and the supplemental environmental projects that were associated with that consent judgment. We're going to talk about the details of that action. So that consent judgment itself was a lot of pages. We're definitely not going to read it to you, but we want to highlight some of the important parts of it, things that you might want to be aware of or that we think you might be interested in. We're also going to talk a little bit about other activities going on at the landfill right now. Once we get done with that, we do want to make sure we're leaving plenty of time for question and answer. And so I'll talk to you a little bit in a minute about how you can ask those questions, but that's why we have so many people on the panel today, is we really want to be able to respond to some of those questions for you and get you the answers that you need. Now, that being said, we have a lot of panelists on. We might not have everybody that can answer every question, so we did the best we can, but if our folks can't answer your question today, we will definitely get back to you with the answers that you are looking for. We'll close out the night tonight just talking a little bit about how you can get more information. We do have a specific website for Arbor Hills Landfill on our EGLE web platform, but because that has just changed, we want to make sure that folks remember how to get to that information, and the page itself has changed and our platform has changed. So it might look a little different to you if you've come there before and you've come there again recently. And then we'll talk a little bit about who you can contact or how you can get a hold of us if you have further questions. All right, so on to that housekeeping stuff. Just to let you know that your lines will be muted during the meeting today, and we are recording the meeting. So we'll post this meeting recording on EGLE's YouTube channel, which is just on YouTube at Michigan EGLE, EGLE. So if you have to jump off early or you know someone else who might be interested in this information, we'll be sharing the link to the video later on, probably early next week, if I'm being honest, with all of you though, so you can pass that forward or check it out or get parts that you missed or whatever is helpful for you. So when it comes to asking questions, there's two ways to do it. You can use the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. So I kind of like that when I'm in a meeting like this. I know we're going to be throwing a lot of stuff at you. If you have questions as Scott's going through the presentation, feel free to even just type in there and then not click send or click send, whatever you want to do. But using that question and answer box is a really nice way to get your question out there. If you feel strongly about verbalizing your question, you can always raise your hand when we get to the question and answer portion of the night, and I will try to call on people in the order that they were received so that we can have you verbalize your question. I know we do have at least one person that's calling in tonight, so I want to just make sure that folks calling in, if you want to ask a question verbally, you can do that as well. You're just going to click #2 on your phone, and that's going to raise your hand for me so I am able to see that. So I know you guys didn't come to hear me talk, so I'm going to pass it over to Scott. So Scott, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on, and then once you are ready, and I can see you, so that's perfect. Go ahead and share your screen and we'll get you going.
Okay.
All right, that looks great from this end. I think you're good to go.
Good. All right, thank you, Jennifer. Welcome everyone to another session of Arbor Hills Updates. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Scott Miller, and I'm just going to get this off the screen here. Over. There we go. I'm with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. I'm going to present information on some of the main parts of the recent enforcement settlement with the landfill, and also provide some overall status updates. So the main purpose of the settlement was to establish corrective actions to reduce odors and to protect public health. Our goal for tonight is to provide information related to corrective actions in the consent judgment and to answer any questions that you might have. As you are probably aware, EGLE and the US EPA have been investigating nuisance odor issues at the landfill for several years. And during this time, numerous violations of state and federal regulations have been documented. To resolve these violations, there have been a few settlement agreements between EGLE, EPA, and the various companies operating at the landfill. I'm going to talk about the most recent settlement with Green for Life, which is the current operator of the landfill. And then I'll talk a little bit about the settlement that we reached last year with Arbor Hills Energy, which is the gas energy facility located at the landfill. The recent settlement with Green for Life is a consent judgment, or CJ. A consent judgment is a judicial settlement. So EGLE first attempts to resolve violations by working with companies in a voluntary or administrative manner. And these attempts were not successful. And therefore, EGLE filed a lawsuit against GFL in October of 2020. The court ordered the parties to try and reach a settlement prior to going to trial. After a highly technical negotiation process, and a mutual settlement was agreed upon, and the consent judgment was finalized last month. The consent judgment contains a penalty, a compliance plan, and 3 supplemental environmental projects, or SEPs. Arbor Hills Green for Life is required to pay a $355,000 monetary fine and is required to invest an additional $1.9 million toward environmental projects. There is a robust compliance plan, which we'll talk about here in more detail. And there are 3 SEPs, or supplemental environmental projects. And these include operation of a real-time air monitoring network and public-facing website to provide perimeter monitoring data to the community, EGLE, and the landfill. The second step requires the landfill to construct a new household hazardous waste collection facility and funding for operating this facility. And the third step requires planting a tree buffer to reduce fugitive dust and odors. The consent judgment focuses on odor and air emission controls. It requires compliance with all current state and federal regulations, as well as numerous requirements above and beyond these current regulations. It also establishes stipulated penalties for non-compliance. And stipulated penalties are monetary penalties the landfill is subject to if they violate the terms of the agreement. Compliance plan is organized by category and includes specific requirements for operation of the gas collection and control system, waste and liquid management processes, as well as compost management. In addition to these operational requirements, the consent judgment requires perimeter air quality monitoring and enhanced wellhead monitoring. GFL is required to conduct enhanced quarterly monitoring, record keeping, and reporting for the gas collection system. The new requirements increase the frequency of gas system monitoring and expand the specific performance data to be collected. This includes more frequent documentation of wellhead condition and a shortened time frame for completing repairs to any identified wellhead deficiencies. It requires landfill staff to be trained in conducting wellhead observations and to use a standard system for conducting and reporting these observations. The enhanced wellhead measurements include documentation of well elevations, depths, water levels, pump performance, gas flow, available implied vacuum, and valve openings. The consent judgment also requires identification and a schedule for completing necessary repairs to individual gas wells and the gas system overall. There's a requirement for reducing water levels in the well field and a time frame for ensuring water in the wells are maintained at appropriate levels. This enhanced monitoring will allow EGLE to determine gas system performance in a more timely manner and ensure the landfill is monitoring and making necessary corrections in a more aggressive time frame. The CJ also has requirements for better surface emission monitoring of methane. Surface methane measurements are required to be taken in a tighter pattern and from additional areas of the landfill, like areas of active construction, as well as the active face. In addition to manual measurements of surface methane emissions, the landfill is required to take measurements of surface methane using a drone. The drone measurements are conducted every month where manual measurement is not conducted and requires a schedule for corrective actions. This enhanced monitoring provides another means of evaluating gas system performance and ensuring more timely corrective actions. EGLE also has the ability to conduct audits of the landfill surface emission monitoring using our own monitoring equipment. The landfill must maintain a list of waste streams that are potentially odorous and establish procedures for handling these waste streams to ensure odors are controlled. Additionally, an approved plan is required for the excavation of the final waste cells at the landfill, referred to as cell 6. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. The landfill is required to apply daily cover of the active face to a depth of between 9 and 12 inches. This will help ensure or help in reducing waste odors from newly disposed waste areas. The landfill is also required to implement a compost management plan. The plan requires timely processing of compost, training of all landfill compost operators, and limits the amount of compost allowed at the site. The consent judgment includes requirements to control odors from leachate collection and storage areas. Leachate is the liquid that comes from or is in contact with the waste, and therefore can be quite odorous. Aeration and carbon filtration systems are required on all leachate storage tanks. The CJ requires a landfill to conduct quarterly evaluations of stormwater controls to ensure stormwater is kept clean and drained away from the site. Each quarter, a third-party engineer will map the surface of the landfill, evaluate current stormwater control activities, and determine if more stormwater controls or repairs to the landfill surface are needed. These evaluations, controls, and corrective actions will also prevent excessive rain and snow from entering the landfill, will help control erosion, and prevent leachate outbreaks. An important component of this settlement was to be able to quantify air emissions coming from the landfill. The consent judgment requires implementation of a robust, state-of-the-art air and weather monitoring network. The monitoring network allows the landfill and EGLE to monitor the effectiveness of odor and emission controls at the landfill. There are two primary gases emitted from landfills that contribute to odors and are measurable with current instruments. And these are methane and hydrogen sulfide. The landfill is required to install and operate 6 stationary air monitors, a meteorological station, and a mobile air monitoring station. The locations of the air monitors can be adjusted, but were selected to capture the predominant flow of emissions from the landfill to the downwind communities. Data from the air and weather monitoring is required to be posted and available on a public-facing website in near real time. The landfill is required to also operate a software system that allows them to determine where the emissions are coming from on the landfill. The settlement also establishes action levels for methane and hydrogen sulfide. If the monitors detect concentrations of either methane or hydrogen sulfide above these action levels, the landfill is required to promptly identify and eliminate the source of those emissions. The air monitoring network is a very important component of the consent judgment and will help identify and correct potential issues in a more timely manner, reducing the potential for nuisance odors in the community. Data from the perimeter monitors will be posted to a public website and will be downloadable so that all interested parties can track this information. The mobile air monitoring station arrived on site last week. This monitor will be used as a backup to the stationary monitors and will also be available to the landfill and, upon EGLE request, to any other location on the landfill to collect air quality information. There are 3 flares at the landfill. These flares are required to control gas from the landfill. The CJ requires more frequent and specific flare testing to ensure they are operating properly and available when needed. I mentioned this earlier, but wanted to share a few more points here. The current landfill footprint includes 1 remaining area for major filling. This area is known as cell 6. This is the area on the northeast corner of the landfill. Currently, the old waste material from this area is being removed and is scheduled to continue for a couple months. Once the excavation is complete, this area will receive a new bottom liner and new gas collection system. From an odor perspective, Cell 6 is located closer to the community and therefore presents a higher potential for odors than other areas of the landfill. As such, an odor management plan is required for Cell 6 construction. This plan requires daily monitoring and also requires construction to be stopped if the perimeter monitors detect emissions above the action levels coming from the construction area. EGLE will be keeping a close eye on Cell 6 construction, and we wanted the community to be aware of this ongoing project. As I mentioned earlier, the settlement includes 3 supplemental environmental projects. These are additional projects the landfill agreed to implement. The landfill is required to construct and operate a collection facility for household hazardous waste, which includes items like paints, solvents, automotive fluids, batteries, and fluorescent bulbs. This will help eliminate these materials from disposal in a landfill. The landfill is required to make the collection facility available to residents of Washtenaw County, the city of Northville, and Northville Township. The collection facility will be operated by Washtenaw County with financial assistance from the landfill. The landfill is required to plant a vegetated buffer intended to reduce the transport of dust and odors. This includes planting of trees in a 600-foot row on the eastern border of the composting facility and a 500-foot row on the eastern border of the landfill. As I mentioned earlier, the landfill is required to operate a perimeter air monitoring network. Specific parts of this project were included as a supplemental environmental project. The objectives of the perimeter emission monitoring SAP are to identify concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and methane at the landfill perimeter that exceed action levels, and to identify where on the landfill these emissions are coming from, and to operate the public-facing website to provide information to the public about landfill emissions. So I covered a lot of material here related to this recent settlement. On this slide, I try and summarize some of the requirements that go above and beyond federal and state regulations and are specifically targeted to reduce emissions and odors. This includes more frequent and detailed well monitoring and timely implementation of corrective actions, reduction in water levels within the wells, specific technical training for landfill staff, enhanced monitoring, including drone monitoring of methane emissions from the surface of the landfill, increased depth of soil for covering daily waste, odor control requirements for the new Cell 6 construction, implementation of a compost management plan, regular engineering review and corrective action plan for stormwater control, air quality controls on leachate storage tanks, more frequent testing and maintenance of the flares, and operation of an air and weather monitoring network. EGLE has also been working with the energy plant at the landfill called Arbor Hills Energy to resolve violations of their emission limits. This plant uses collected landfill gas to generate electricity for DTE energy and residential use. Recently, EGLE and federal partners entered a settlement with the energy plant to reduce sulfur emissions. This will resolve past emission limit violations and significantly improve air emissions from the plant by requiring installation of a sulfur control system and a renewable gas plant. The renewable gas plant cleans the gas and places it in the natural gas pipeline for residential use. The existing gas to energy plant will be maintained on site to provide peak demand electricity for DTE on a limited basis. So that was a quick review of some of the major requirements of the recent settlement. This represents a significant step forward in controlling nuisance odors from the landfill and improving overall landfill operations. This was a joint effort by EGLE, Arbor Hills Landfill, and the community over a long period of time. EGLE wishes to thank the community for representatives of the Conservancy Initiative and for our state and local government partners in helping us reach this important milestone. Going forward, I want to emphasize that EGLE understands the community's concerns with odors, fugitive dust, and issues like blowing garbage. We know our jobs are not done. This settlement was a big step forward, and we are committed to remaining responsive to community concerns and to continued oversight of landfill operations. And we encourage the community members to reach out to us with any concerns they have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer, who will lead us through our question and answer session.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Scott. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and just get up this other slide here so you guys can remember who is on the panel. We do have a couple of questions already in the question box, so thanks for sending those in. Those are good ones. We'll get to those in just a second. But if my panelists can go ahead and turn their cameras back on. While you guys are getting settled in, I just want to go over again really quickly how you can ask a question if you're on. I know we had a couple of people join probably after we went over the housekeeping stuff in the beginning. So you're going to want to use that question and answer button at the bottom of your screen if you want to type in a question. If you feel strongly about speaking your question out loud or something like that, you can go ahead and either click that raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or if you are calling in, you're going to press #2 on your phone, and that should raise your hand, at least so that I can see it. So hopefully that will work. So again, here's your panel. You just heard from Scott. My name's Jennifer again. You just heard from Scott. I've got folks listed off here. They're not exactly how I see them on my screen, but Mike Kowalczyk is the Air Quality Division Inspector. So if you've had complaints or concerns in the past, you may have chatted with him. You may see him out there with some of the measuring and monitoring equipment as well. Jeff Rathbun, it works in our enforcement unit. So he worked with Alex Clark, who works in the materials management enforcement division, to work on the consent judgment. So they're going to be able to answer most questions about the judgment itself and what it contains. And then Brett Coulter and Gary Schuin work at the landfill not at the landfill or with the landfill, but with our materials management division. And the landfill is one of the places that they do inspections and things like that. So we've got hopefully a good group of folks here to be able to answer some questions for you. This is a good question to start with. So a couple of the photos that were in the presentation showed wells and things like that that had trash outside of the ground cover and things like that. So the question is there anything in the consent judgment that is going to cover sort of that general trash blowing and things like that? So Alex, I'm going to pass that to you first, if there's anything specific in there or not regarding just general trash being in places where it's not supposed to be.
Sure, not necessarily covered specifically in the consent judgment, but there are operational requirements in Part 115 that require landfills to operate day to day and not have excessive blowing papers, blowing trash, blowing refuse. So that is a violation that we can and do cite at our facilities, and would be applicable here if we did see it as excessive. And if also, oftentimes, if we do encounter a facility who's not out actively addressing the issue, that could rise to the level of a violation.
Yeah, thank you for that. I couldn't remember for sure, so I'm glad that you were able to answer that question. This is an interesting question. I know we had talked about this, so I think I'm going to pass this one to you first, Scott, and just have you address it. And then if you feel like you need someone else to chime in, I'll have you pass it over to them. But this question is talking about the air monitoring that's going to be happening on the perimeter. And the question is, how soon do we see that data? How soon is that data available to the public on the website? I know we always say near real time, and we say near real time when we're talking about just our state air monitoring system, some of the things that we monitor there, because it obviously takes, a second for things to go from a measuring device to a computer to a website. There's sort of that delay. But if you could talk a little bit about how this system is supposed to be set up and working, I would appreciate that.
Sure. So the landfill has, I think, 60 days to get the public-facing website up and running. And I just had a conversation with their engineering firm today, and we talked with the landfill last week about this as well. Currently, the conversation is that near real time is going to be within an hour of the data being collected. So they need some time to transfer the data from the monitors to the website. So for example, time period of 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., they're suggesting by 10:15 that data is going to be available on the website.
So I have a follow-up question to that too. I know you said that there's a specific time frame where the landfill has to have the monitoring system set up and ready to go on the website. Do you know, and if you don't, it's okay, maybe we can find out, because I think this is going to be important. Are they going to be announcing, or we can somehow announce when that website is live so that folks can know when they can go look and start looking at it? And that's going to be housed on the Arbor Hills website, correct? Not on EGLE's website. So a couple of questions.
Yeah, so it will be an Arbor Hills website. Formatting is going to look similar to the website that the landfill currently has for the school air monitoring system. And as far as I know, there's no plans right now for announcing that, though we can certainly make that effort if that is something of interest.
Yeah, I think maybe let's plan on, just once we know that it's up and running, we can send a note to our Arbor Hills list, because we've got a lot of these folks on it just to make sure that folks are getting that information when it's ready. So no, thanks for that, Scott. This is a question, Brett. I think I'm going to send this one to you, and if you don't know the answer right away to it, let me know, because we might not have the right people on to be able to answer this question. But this is a question dealing with PFAS coming off the landfill into a nearby creek. So I don't know if you have any input on that you could offer up.
Yeah, we addressed this in the PFAS meeting, the MPART PFAS meeting we had back in February, I believe. So Chris, if you want to go back and look at the recording, I believe that's on either the MPART or the Arbor Hills webpage. But specifically, Water Resources Division is addressing that issue.
Yeah, that's a good reminder too. So that meeting was recorded. It's certainly on our Michigan EGLE YouTube channel. If not, like you said, Brett, linked on our Arbor Hills site. If it's not linked on our Arbor Hills site, it should be. So I will make sure that happens as well. So thanks for that update as well. Alex, this question is going to be for you. So this has to deal with the residential hazardous waste collection. And the question is, will it only be one day a year, or is it going to be more frequently? Is anything like that sort of spelled out in the CJ, or is it a little bit more nebulous right now?
No, that's an excellent question. So what we did as part of the requirements in the CJ for this specific set for household hazardous waste collection, the minimum requirement is that the facility operate 4 days a week and at a minimum 4 hours per day for those operational days. So it will be, like I said, at a minimum 4 days per week, a minimum 4 hours per day of those operational days.
And so that's going to be something that the intention is for folks to just be able to drive up, folks in the community, not me, because I live on the west side of the state, so I couldn't drive over there and drop stuff off, but folks in the community could come during those hours at any time to drop stuff off. It's not like a scheduled event type of thing.
Yes, that is the intent.
Okay, great. So this question is, I'm going to actually send this one to Mike, if you don't mind, or actually not Mike, I'm sorry, to Gary. So this has to do with trash from the landfill blowing off-site and getting into other properties. So specifically, this one is talking about Thayer Cemetery and the nature area. If folks see that kind of trash, should they call us? Who should they get a hold of if they're seeing trash blowing off-site?
They could get a hold of me. I think my email address is on the information on the website. But yeah, if you're seeing trash off site, you can get a hold of me. We can get a hold of the contractor, the consultant out there, and get it cleaned up. Or they can also get a hold of Brett Coulter. We both kind of take care of the complaint issues out there.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if you see it happening, let us know. We'd rather know than not know and have people be upset about it. So definitely give a call to Brett, give a call to Gary, and we can share their contact information as well. So thanks for that question. Jeff, I'm going to send this one to you to start, and then if you want to send it to Alex potentially afterwards. But this question is specifically talking about the stipulated penalties. And so what happens if the landfill doesn't follow the terms of the consent judgment? So if there's something in there that they violate, can you walk us through a little bit of the steps, and if there's any sort of monetary penalty potentially for something like that or not?
Right. So depending on which part of the judgment they're in violation of, under section 13, there's the stipulated penalties. If they fail to comply with a certain part, there's specific stipulated penalties for each paragraph within the consent judgment, or I shouldn't say each, for most of them. And those penalties are on a per day violation. So, and they go up the longer that the violation is ongoing. So they've got a set amount for days 1 through 5, then 6 through 10, day 11 and beyond, it goes up even more. So depending on what the violation is, we'll decide what the penalty amount, stipulated fine amount is. They do have the option, if we do send them a stipulated fine letter, there is a form of dispute resolution that they can go through. But again, that's part of what's included here. That's under paragraph 12, I believe. Yeah, 12 of the consent judgment.
So Alex, just want to make sure you don't have anything to add to that before we move on to the next one. Nope, you're good. Okay, yeah, I thought so too. So yeah, it's interesting that these judgments, when they come out like this, do have pretty stringent, like Jeff said, requirements to comply. And then if you don't comply, actions that will happen. So if you want specific information about that too, that it's a little bit digging a little bit deeper, definitely let us know. And Jeff, while I have you kind of on mute here, can you just talk a little bit about how long the consent judgment is valid for. So I know there's different, because we have these different consent agreements, consent judgments, consent orders are kind of different. How do we look at this? Does it automatically expire if they've, after a certain amount of years? Do they have to be in compliance for a certain amount of years, or how does that work?
Well, there is that. They need to stay in compliance. At a minimum, it's 5 years. It shall remain in effect for the bulk of the consent order. It's going to remain in effect for 10 years for the monitoring requirements. So the supplemental environmental project for the monitoring. The one I'm not sure of is if it's also 10 years for the hazardous waste SEP. Alex, is that correct? Yep. Okay, so 10 years for that. The rest of the consent judgment could be terminated after 5 years if they remain in compliance, and the company submits a request to terminate at that time. And that is under paragraph 17 of the consent judgment.
Yeah, that was going to be my question too, is do they have to request it, or is it automatic? So they have to request it, is what you said. Okay.
Right. It's not automatic. They have to submit a request to terminate, and then we will review it. EGLE will review it. Both AQD and MMD will review that request for termination, and then we'll make a judgment on whether it is acceptable to terminate at that time.
Okay. And then, so a follow-up question to that is, do we have, or is there an option to sort of re-up some of those SEPs from EGLE standpoint? So let's say, in 10 years, we really feel that the air monitoring system is important. It's an important part of how the landfill functions. We've found that it's been very valuable. The information that it's been collecting, it's been able to help us really observe where odors are coming from. Is there an option in there for us to say, you know what, we really need you to do this for another 5 years or another 10 year, another year, whatever? Is there an option for that?
Not within the judgment. That's something that we would have to negotiate. I believe that would lead to a new judgment at that time. Alex, is that correct? I mean, is that the way that you would see this going?
Yeah, so we would be bound by the constraints and the time frame set forth in the consent judgment. So at the end of that time period, though, it doesn't mean we can't have that conversation if it makes sense to the landfill's benefit too, that it's helping maintain compliance, or if there's strong community desire to have those in place, or maintain beyond what the consent judgment requires. And that's where, community input and feedback from the landfill could go hand in hand down the road too. But within the confines of the consent judgment, we could not continue those actions beyond that 10 years.
Right. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just because, and I think we've seen companies do that before when they have sort of like that community benefits project. They just keep it going because it, like you said, that's a benefit to not only community, but also to them. Okay, so this question is going back to odors. So I'm going to pass this one to you, Mike. So the asker is saying, the odor reports have been increasing in frequency, and we've been seeing more coming in, or some community members have been experiencing more odors recently than they had for a little while. What are the expectations there? What's the realistic expectation about odors diminishing? So do we see these actions that the landfill is going to be required to take with the judgment really, minimizing a lot of those odors that we've been experiencing? I know from your work with some of our new monitoring equipment, you've been really seeing a way to target where those odors are coming from and being able to stop them faster. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that, and then, what our expectations are as far as the few different types of odors that we have at the landfill, and how we see those being minimized in the future.
Thanks, Jennifer. So there's a lot into that question. With cell 6, especially when cell 6 is constructed and MSW, municipal solid waste, is deposited in cell 6, we definitely anticipate an increase of odors, compared to where it is now. We hope with our perimeter monitoring system any specific problem that could help will be identified quickly. And so hopefully odor episodes are shorter. We might see more odors during the day than we see now, as opposed to a lot of our odor events are at night. We should see an improvement from odors that were directly related to wellheads. The landfill is now required to inspect wellheads twice a month. When I've been out there a number of times, I literally would see wellheads, leaking landfill gas, and I could smell them, well downwind. So we think that issue will be resolved. Regarding odors, maybe an increase in odors, it's really hard to gauge. When we look at odor patterns over the course of a year, a lot of it is related to weather patterns. It's related to atmospheric, dispersion, morning inversions. Sometimes we have a favorable wind, sometimes we're not. So a lot of that, a lot of the variability is directly related to weather patterns. I don't have a sense that that odors are increasing for some unknown reason. We've had a few incidents, specific incidents. There was some vacuum loss a couple times, some related to an issue with the flare, some related to the northern portion of the landfill. Some of the wells lost vacuum. So we have had some specific episodes. We've had some odors related to compost. But other than that, I don't think we're somehow going in the wrong direction.
Oh, thanks for that. And I know just from, I used to be an inspector, and I know you guys probably don't care about that, but I've definitely had my share of facilities that had sort of, persistent odor issues. And I know it's hard to keep complaining and keep calling and keep messaging us, but it really is helpful to staff when you do that. So, please keep on doing that if you're experiencing any concerns or you have complaints. I know, Scott, I just wanted to see if you had anything that you wanted to add to that before we move on to the next one.
It was a really good question. And, I just want to make it clear that, the intent of this settlement was to implement corrective actions at the landfill to reduce odors and protect public health. This is an active landfill, very large, and the public should not expect zero odors. There will be odors, but what we hope to achieve is a continued reduction in those odors, and certainly a reduction in nuisance odors, which are a specific category of odors that we have in our authority to regulate.
Yeah, thanks for that, Scott. So we do have a person on the line that wants to speak a couple questions out. So David Drennan, I'm going to just allow you to unmute here. So you should be able to click your unmute button and then talk whenever you're ready.
Okay, I think I did it.
You did great.
So I just wanted to thank the team, first of all. I've had a lot of discussions with Scott and Mike and on a lesser extent, Gary and Brett. And I know they've worked very hard at this settlement. There's a lot of wins in this settlement for the community. We always wish there'd be a few more and it would have went further, but there's some big wins in this. What I wanted to do is ask, and maybe I'll ask separately. I wanted to ask the two gentlemen from Air Quality Division, Scott and Mike, and I don't care which one. What do you think the biggest wins are that are in here? What were the biggest things that you were able to negotiate as something that the landfill gave up or is going to do over and above the regulations? That's going to be something that's going to help out the community downwind.
Yeah, Scott, do you want to answer that one? I know you had that slide that kind of showed some of those extra things.
Yeah, so there's a slide that kind of talks about the actions that are above and beyond state and federal regs. I would say, Dave, thanks, appreciate the question. and Mike, feel free to add on here. In my mind, the biggest win for the community and for EGLE, and it really for the landfill too, is the perimeter air monitoring network. With that system, we can detect whether emissions leaving the landfill are going to impact public health. We can detect whether those emissions may cause nuisance odor conditions, and we can respond and correct the problems much quicker. That system is continuously operating 24/7. It was positioned, and so there's, it's beyond any other air monitoring network at landfills in this country. So it's truly state of the art, and it's positioned, and a number of monitors are located where they're at to be protective of that downwind community. And so in my mind, that was probably the biggest win. We'll continue to see results from that and continued improvements in landfill operations because of that monitoring system.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Scott. I think that's a really good point. Brett, I think you wanted to chime in on that from a materials management division perspective.
Yeah, just real quick, I would say, Dave, I think a lot of positives came out of that, and I think, some of the biggest things were just the communication back and forth that we had with the landfill and and the feedback from the community to address the issues that we saw.
And I don't know, do I have any other staff that want to chime in on that? And it was a really good question, Dave. So thank you for
Jennifer,
asking.
I would add that, it's a small thing, but I think it's a very important part of the consent judgment. Is this twice a month wellhead inspections? Said, a lot of our odors have been directly related to these wellheads, the condition of the wellheads over the years. So definitely, we should see less issues related to the wellhead. So I'm very happy about that part of it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too, because that's a lot more frequent inspections than they were ever required to do in the past. So no, that's a really good point too, Mike. Dave, do you have a follow-up for that?
Yeah, I did, Jennifer.
Sure, go ahead.
I watch a lot of TV news, so I'm good at follow-ups. The follow-up is a simple one. So we heard what the wins are. If you could have got one more thing in the consent order, what would it have been? What is the thing that you couldn't get negotiated in there?
Yeah, pontificating on potential. So that's a good question. I don't know, Scott, do you want to throw anything out there?
I can start, and I'd say, it wasn't a complete loss, but perhaps not as far as what we had hoped. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One being, sort of the constraints of getting it done, just physically being able to do it, and the science behind it, and that's overall water levels in the landfill. And so, we understood, we throughout this process, we've learned a lot as a state agency, but we also had partner groups. So we partnered with the US EPA, we partnered with landfill experts in other parts of the country to assist us in understanding the complexity of issues. And the one issue that I'm talking about here is water levels in the landfill and how those contribute to the performance of the gas system, and how those contribute to other issues like leachate volumes that they have to manage. And getting the consent judgment to a point of agreement with all parties was difficult on that front. We succeeded in identifying and coming up with a number that's 50%. So 50% of the gas well needs to have open area, unobstructed by water. That's a success. what we were originally shooting for was probably something less than that, maybe 25%. But like I said, it was just difficult to get there because it's physically it's hard to achieve that, and the science is also sort of not completely in support of that.
That is interesting, the complicated issue that a landfill is just in general, how it works, how it functions, and all of that. So yeah, Dave, appreciate the questions for sure. I'm going to move on to a couple other ones if you don't mind.
No, thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I muted you too quickly. So if you want to go ahead and say what you wanted to say, I apologize for that.
Jennifer, I had a few more to add. One is it's really technology related why it didn't show up in the settlement. So we don't have a way to monitor for odors for the compost. We simply couldn't determine what the chemical compounds that were in the compost that we could easily detect. Another one was we wanted to see drone surveys for hydrogen sulfide, for the whole landfill. Again, another technology issue. We simply, there's issues with how long it takes to sample for hydrogen sulfide to get a single reading. And so I think that would have been, very beneficial. So that, that's a couple things. And then one other issue, one very odorous compound, which we're not monitoring for, is ethyl mercaptan. And so, any ethyl mercaptans in the landfill gas, that would pass through our perimeter monitoring system. So a couple little, our perimeter monitoring system, like Scott said, I think it is the best in the country, but it's still not perfect.
Oh, thanks for adding that in. Couple other ones, and actually this one is going to go to you, I think, Mike, anyway. So if you want to kind of stay on unmuted. So the question was, is the landfill gas system capacity, the flares and the engines and all of that stuff adequate to handle increased gas capacity in the future? So once cell 6 starts getting going and all of that stuff, are they going to have enough capacity there to handle that gas as far as we know?
So the nameplate capacity on those 3 flares is certainly sufficient. However, say over the last couple of years, we've had problems of, at any given time with at least one of those flares. And so if one flare is out and the energy plant is down, there is not sufficient flaring capacity. And so one of the requirements in the consent judgment is that the landfill conduct this monthly test of each flare. So we definitely need these flares, all 3 of them, to work appropriately. Going forward, AHE is going to be burning less landfill gas in their turbines until the RNG plant is built. And so there's going to be more strain on these flares. So the landfill's really going to have to step up, maintenance, making sure those flares work properly.
So that's definitely something that we're going to be keeping an eye on, I think, is what I got from that too, Mike, for sure. So thanks for answering. This is an interesting question, and I don't think that we have staff on to address it, but I'm going to just kind of let you guys know what it is. And then I think we can get back to the asker on this one. But the question is about long-term studies, health studies on the exposure to landfill gas. So we don't have any Department of Health and Human Services folks on the line tonight, but we can definitely reach out to some of our partners there and see if there's anything that they could help provide for that. And then we can share that forward. This is another question that I think might go to you, Mike. But if you don't know the answer to this one and somebody else does, then please let me know. But the question was, is there any plans to replace the candlestick flare? So is there any plans to do like an enclosed flare or any other type of flare at the landfill at this point that you know of?
Not that I know
And I hadn't heard anything, but I didn't know if there was talk about
Yeah,
that.
they would
So,
have to submit, a permit application if they're modifying their flaring system.
yeah.
And thus far, they have not done that.
So great questions you guys have. I don't have any more in the queue right now. But I'll give you just a second to get some typed in there or to raise your hand if you want to ask a question. So again, for folks that are calling in, I know we've got a few more. So just in case you didn't hear and you do want to ask a question out loud, you're just going to click #2 on your phone and that should raise your hand for me. And any of my other folks, if you want to ask a question out loud, just click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen and that will raise the hand for me to see as well. So this is another question on expansion. So I'm going to send this one to Gary first in case you know, and if you don't, maybe Brett or someone else might have an idea. But the question is, at what point or time frame can the landfill expand their footprint to the north side of 6 Mile or increase in height? I don't know what the restrictions are in that. I know that kind of goes to the county plan sort of conversation, but I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about that, Gary. And if you're not the right person, maybe Brett has a response for that.
Sure, I can talk to that. The landfill is allowed to request an extension or expansion of the landfill pretty much whenever they would like. Our process is they would submit an application, and then if an application comes in, we start reviewing it. We have a notice for a public meeting. So if there's interest in a public meeting, we would have a public meeting on it. It's a long process. We have 150 days from the time an application comes in to review it. And then we could extend that time frame out if there's complications to last over a year or up to a year. But at this point, I've not had any conversations or had any discussions or heard anything that the landfill is planning on requesting an expansion or submitting a construction application.
So Gary, is a kind of a follow-up to that. I mean, you talked about the length of the process and the fact that there would be a public comment period. So for folks who might be interested in that, do you know the best way for them to find out about when that might happen? So if that's going to happen, where would they go to find out if we were holding a public comment period? I don't know if you can speak to that at all, but I think that might be helpful.
Right. When we have a construction permit application, we'd put a notice in the local newspaper. So it would be in there. It would also be on the EGLE calendar. So people can be watching that if that comes out. In this situation, we might be able to put a notice out to the folks in the community, since we have email addresses and a website, to put that information out there as well, just to let people know what's happening.
Yeah, sure. No, that's a good point. And I can share the link to the EGLE calendar, which is something that you can subscribe to, and it will send you updates. Oh, thank you very much. I think Jim shared that out for you guys. So that's a great thing too, is that you can subscribe to that. You can tell it sort of, I mean, it's not that smart, I guess, but you can kind of indicate what things you want to get information on, and it will send you updates on that. And that's also a great point. We do have such a good list of emails, so we can definitely send that announcement out. And I have one follow-up on that I'm going to bug you about, Gary, and then I have a couple of folks with their hands raised. So my question is, when you guys are sort of working through this process, when in the process do you let community know that it's happening? Does it not happen really until it gets to that announcement of public comment? Or do you have a mechanism to kind of share some of that first information when the landfill first does the ask, if that makes any sense?
I don't know that we typically share too much information early on.
Okay.
When we get an application in, we do a general review called a administrative completeness review, just to make sure all the different portions of the application are there. And then after that, we do a technical review. And once we've gone partway through the technical review, had the contractor make whatever changes are needed to the plans, then we would have a public comment period, or at least have the notice for a meeting. If we get a request for a meeting, then we have the meeting, have a public comment period. And then we would take the comments into consideration when we finalize the plans, our comments on the plans and the review of the plans.
Yeah, no, sure. I appreciate that. I know it's similar with air quality division, although we're trying to move a little bit more towards like, hey, this company submitted an application, heads up. Not that we're necessarily sharing a lot of that. So I just wondered how your process works. So I appreciate you talking about that. Scott, I see you have your hand up. Would you
Yeah.
like to comment?
Yeah, and maybe Brett or Gary can add on to this. I think part of that question related to an expansion of the landfill has to do with the county solid waste landfill commission, I think they're called. And EGLE's review of an expansion request, it comes from a technical and a permitting perspective. But approval for a landfill to be expanded to a new area comes from the county. And that's about the extent of my knowledge. And I don't know if Brett or Gary want to add on to that, but I just thought I'd kind of try and clarify that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Okay, so Larry, I see you have your hand up. Hold on one second. You should be able to unmute yourself now and ask your question or make your comment. So try it one more time. You should be able to unmute.
There it is.
There you
Okay.
go. Yep, you got it.
All right. Yeah. I'm Larry Bean, the district supervisor for the Materials Management Division. The previous owner of the landfill, Advanced Disposal, had looked into the possibility of expanding to the north. And the residents are aware of that. And the first step in any proposed expansion is to get on the solid waste management plan for the county. So it's a county solid waste management plan. They petitioned to Washtenaw County to amend the solid waste management plan for that expansion. They cannot apply for a construction permit from EGLE until they are first on the county plan for that expansion. So Advanced Disposal looked into that. The county evaluated that. There was a lot of opposition to that expansion. The county then dropped that idea. They did not go forward with the amendment to the plan to include an expansion. So that was dead. Now, the current company, GFL, they have not indicated to us that they have any plans to expand to the north. It doesn't mean they don't, that they can't. They could do that, but they have not indicated to us that they plan to do that. But again, the first step in that process would be for them to approach Washtenaw County and petition to Washtenaw County to amend their county solid waste management plan for the expansion, whether it's a lateral expansion, a vertical expansion, or a new landfill north of 6 Mile Road. So either way, they would have to go first through the county. And I think the people in Northville Township have their ear to the ground well enough to know that, when that occurs, they would know about it. And certainly they're talking to us, and we would let them know if we hear that an expansion is in the works and the county is evaluating that, because they need to be part of that process, the county management plan process. That's for the local communities to evaluate whether they want an expansion. So that's the whole purpose of a county solid waste management plan. It's the local community's acceptance of an expansion or not. And then once the local communities through that solid waste management plan have agreed to that, then the landfill can apply for a construction permit from EGLE. Then it lands on our lap, and then we have our evaluation of the plans, and we have a public hearing related to that under 115, the Solid Waste Management Act. So that's
Thank you.
process.
Thanks for adding that in, Larry. I appreciate you doing that. You're listening in to the call too. So I appreciate you raising your hand and adding that clarification. Okay. So like I said, we don't have any other questions right now. So I'm going to kind of dilly-dally around and make sure that folks don't have any other ones. I want to make sure that you are getting questions answered that you want answered, and that you're finding out information that you would like to find out about. So you've got us a little bit as a captive audience here for a bit longer if you need us. And obviously, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So a couple things as we're, just waiting here for you. No pressure. You don't have to ask more questions. I just want to make sure you have time to do so if you want to. But so we did share the new website address. So you can always still use Michigan.gov/ArborHills. That's just going to take you kind of to a new look and feel where the consent judgment and the elements of that we discussed tonight are going to be a lot more highlighted. And there's going to be links to some of the aspects that we've talked about. So links to the air monitoring that the landfill is doing when it's up and all of that kind of stuff. You'll be able to find that sort of information on there. And then I think a couple of things came up here tonight that I just want to make sure we're linking appropriately in there as well. We'll definitely give you a copy of the presentation. So I will send that. Everybody that's on tonight, or I think there was some other folks that might have registered that didn't get on, I will send you an email that has the link to the recording. If I do find out anything from our Department of Health and Human Services, I will send that to you as well. And I will send you a copy of the slides. We'll also post those on the website as well, just so folks have those if they need them. If you go to the website and you find that you can't find something that you're looking for, but you know it was there before, please let me know and I will make sure that you have access to that. But I do want to make sure that we're communicating appropriately to you as well. Obviously, feel free to share any of this information that you heard tonight or that I send out to you to anybody who wasn't able to join us for the meeting. And hopefully that will be productive for you. So just seeing a little bit. All right, so let's go over just a couple other things before I let you off the hook for tonight. So here's that new, this actually isn't the new website. I should have put an image of what the new website looks like, but that just happened last Friday on Earth Day. And we had our environmental compliance conference. So it was a little bit of a crazy week last week. So I apologize for not putting a new picture up there, but it functions pretty similarly. Again, just complaints or concerns, you can use our online complaint form. I know folks that use that are very happy with it. So there is the one that's linked on the Arbor Hills page that just kind of pops up. Is also a new online complaint form that's just for air quality. We didn't used to have that sort of as an overall issue thing. It's also very, very easy to use. It goes to the same people. So we definitely will get that information as well. You can always call the 1-800 number and just get a hold of us that way. So another question came in here. So before I let you off the hook, let's see here. So we don't have anybody from our water resources division on right now, but we might have Gary and Brett. You guys might know about this, or maybe Mike, but I'm going to pass this one to Gary first just to see. So the question was, with the water level as an issue in the gas collection system, at least in some cases, is there a possibility, or is there an already known concern with groundwater or surface water quality? So I know we've engaged with our water division on some of this, but I'm not sure to what extent, and I don't know if folks on the line tonight know that or not. So Gary, do you mind taking a stab at that? Or, oh, Scott, were you going to?
I'll just start and I'll hand it over to Gary and Brett.
Sure, perfect.
The two issues are unrelated. And so the water and the gas wells that I was describing has to do with the performance and the ability of the gas wells to extract gas. Water builds up in a landfill because it rains and there's moisture in the waste itself. The issues related to groundwater and potential contamination, I can let Gary and Brett kind of speak to that.
I think Brett said he is more than happy to talk about that. So Gary, you're off the hook for a second. Brett, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so keep in mind that the landfill cells are closed cells, so they're not in contact with groundwater. The liquid in these gas wells is leachate, and that's pumped out through cells, through the sumps in the cells, and through the gas collection system.
Right, so thank you for that. It's a good clarification for sure. All right. Okay, hold on one. All right, Larry, I unmuted you again. So if you had something else to add.
Yeah, just to clarify that last question, the liquid that's perched up in the waste, as Brett said, does not come in contact with the groundwater. It's up within the waste. It's up high. It then can get into the gas collection wells, and when it's in the gas collection wells, it can block the screens so the gas can't get into those wells so the gas can't get out of the landfill if there's water blocking the screen. And then the liquid within the waste slowly works its way down to the liner where there are pipes to collect the leachate, and it then runs to the sumps where it's pumped out and away from the landfill and handled as a contaminant through the sewage system. So that's how it's separated.
All right, thank you. I feel like we need a flow diagram that is actually showing things. That would have been a good idea for that for sure. All right. Okay, well, I'm to my thank you slide. So I'm going to say thank you very, very slowly here because I want to make sure we don't have any other questions. So yeah, the question is there going to be a transcript of this meeting available? So with the video that we post, there is a way to look at sort of the automatic transcription that is generated for that, and it will be posted with the video. So I'll definitely make sure that I give you access to that, or, you know, let you know where that is on YouTube too. So that's a great question. So just to let everybody know, you know, we really appreciate greatly folks taking time out of their evening to come and learn a little bit more about this, to ask their questions. Again, we know the consent judgment is a very hefty piece of paper. And so we wanted to make sure that there was as much understanding about how the process works, what is in there, what the ramifications are, you know, what the expectations should be as possible. That being said, this is, you know, a one-time meeting. So you have all your staff here that are available to have conversations. Feel free to reach out to them. When I send you the follow-up email, I make sure that I include people's contact information. So if you want to reach out to them directly, sometimes it's just easier to do that. I know you heard from Dave earlier today. He's really great at reaching out to us when he has questions. So I would open that up to anybody else who's on the line who would like to do that as well. Definitely have those conversations if you would like to. So again, greatly appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see some nice spring weather coming up here soon. I had hope today, and then now it's cloudy again. So fingers crossed on that. Fingers crossed you guys have a great rest of your evening. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting, but like I said, reach out to us if you want to. And thanks again for joining us tonight. We really appreciated having you.